Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's discussion of AI and sustainability. I'm Josh Green. I am co-CEO of Novata and delighted to be joining you today and delighted to have a handful of speakers who are experts in the area. I'll start with a couple of housekeeping notes. First is this is being recorded. Second, we are taking questions. So if you have questions, please drop them in the Q&A section and we'll take them towards the end of the conversation. Lastly, on the housekeeping side, need to tell you a little bit about Novata. We are a data management platform focused on sustainability data. We help private market participants, largely investors, banks, and companies. We help hundreds of investors and banks and thousands of companies with their sustainability data management. And of course, we'd love to work with you. But the reason why we are having this conversation today is because so many of the investors that we talk to and the companies that we talk to are asking us about AI and how it relates to sustainability. And the truth is, there are a number of ways in which it relates to sustainability. Certainly, we've all read about the energy consumption that is tied to AI. Those of us who are managing businesses or investing in businesses think about the risks associated with AI from a governance perspective, from a legal perspective, and there are a variety of other ways which we'll get into. So it's a complicated space, and we've got some people today here with us who can help us simplify it and get our arms around the issues related to AI and sustainability. So what I'd like to do is first invite the panelists to introduce themselves, and I'll go around the boxes on the screen. And what I'd like to ask is for each of you to share what you do today professionally, but also how you first started getting exposed to issues around AI and sustainability. That'll provide us with some context for the conversation that we're going to have. So if I can get us started with Tracy, would love for you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you first started thinking about AI.
Sure. So I'm Tracy Barba, and I am the Director of Venture Ethics at the Lucas Institute for Venture Ethics at Santa Clara University under the Marcellus Center for Applied Ethics. And how I came to AI and sustainability. Prior to working in academia, I spent about 20 years in venture, working on the IR side, and more recently was head of ESG at 500 Global, where I developed a framework and implemented that framework across a number of funds and worked with hundreds of companies in the portfolio to integrate ESG. And I think that the natural extension and next step was AI, as it was becoming more and more sort of area of focus for us in terms of investment. The questions started to arise about how it is that we keep this safe and all of the other things that came along with it. And I thought, we're going to probably have to think about advising companies on this at some point. So, and look at it through a diligence lens. So that's where my interest began.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tracy. And thanks for being here today. Sam, over to you.
All right, yeah. Hello, everyone. My name's Sam. I'm the co-founder and CTO at Briink Intelligence. So Briink is a AI partner specifically for sustainability-focused organizations. We work with sustainability NGOs and standard bodies, as well as ESG service providers like Novata to bring the kind of latest developments in AI and into sustainability and ESG workflows. And yeah, in doing that, we hope to be a catalyst to kind of accelerate sustainability and sustainable finance across the entire industry. But I mean, my introduction to AI is really from as an engineer. So my background's in statistics and machine learning, really in the field of natural language processing, in lots of different applications in finance and energy systems. But we were very interested in what the role of AI could be to help accelerate the climate transition, and that's what we founded Briink to do. I guess I really come at the topic from a perspective of an engineer, and maybe that also gives me a slightly different view, definitely on the risks, but also potentially on the opportunities if it's kind of carefully implemented of AI in general, but also specifically in sustainability and ESG use cases. And yeah, thanks for inviting me. I'm very much looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks for being here, Sam. And Beth, over to you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Beth Meyer. I'm Chief Legal Officer of Novata, and I run our metrics and regulations team, so our in-house team of experts on sustainability. My first foray into the world of AI was thanks to Novata. So about almost exactly 3 years ago, when ChatGPT exploded onto the scene, at Novata, we lean very forward on data security. We've always been secure by design. So it was like quite a rush from a legal perspective of how do we protect all of our customers' data and integrate AI in the right way without losing out on innovation. And that meant I really needed to understand it so I could create the right guardrails that protected Novata and specifically protect our customers' data, but didn't hamper the company or the productivity and innovation of all of our employees. So I'm grateful to Novata for that. And it has been, I'm a mega AI user. And I love it. And I think it is a wildly powerful tool for sustainability, but I also think it's following a very similar trajectory to the sustainability industry in general, in terms of it started as a voluntary thing to consider for responsible AI disclosures, and now it's really turning into something that's table stakes.
All right. Well, I'm really excited about this conversation, and we've got a lot of ground to cover. I was hoping, Tracy, you could get us started by grounding us with a framework. So, we've talked about, even just in the last 2 minutes, we heard about risks, we heard about opportunities. How do you think about this? And obviously, don't want you to disclose any secret sauce, but you've clearly done a lot of great thinking about this. So it would be helpful if you could ground us in a framework for getting ourselves organized about thinking about these issues.
Sure, happy to. As I mentioned, I came at this from coming out of ESG and into the world of academia. And one of the first things I did was to then tackle AI and try to, or at least formulate some thoughts about a framework for how investors would use, what kind of a framework would they use, how practical, the questions would be around diligencing AI and what kinds of things they should look for. So about 1.5 years ago, I put together a working group, and thanks, Beth, for your input on that, and of GPs and LPs and others in the space, and came up with a framework for how to think about doing diligence. I will caveat, before I tell you what the framework is, I'll caveat that by saying I'm in the second phase of doing some additional research, and we'll update the framework in short order. But for now, the way I think about it, rather than a laundry list of things, I tried to wrap it around an acronym of trust, because I think trust is fundamental to scale and growth, and ensuring that AI can do all of the wonderful things that it can do. And also to prevent it from doing some of the unintended things. So what does that mean in terms of sort of investor perspective? So transparent. So the T is, transparent. So from an investment standpoint, are you looking at the visibility? Do you have visibility into the data and models and decisions? Or, in other words, can they be explained? And how the data was used and how the model works is what I'm talking about under T and transparency. R is reliability. So is it consistently performing over time? Accuracy and precision rates, looking at metrics like detection frequency and those types of things. Is it understandable? So is it explainable? So can it be interpreted, and what are the and can the outcomes be audited? So looking at things like audit pass rates and things of that nature. Secure is the S. So looking at protection of data, models, and users, and asking whether or not it's resilient against misuse or attack. And then finally, the T is around tested and efficient. And this is, around ongoing validation. It also is around resource efficiency. So is it monitored, validated, and is it, constantly being checked for the efficient use of resources? And that ties very squarely to environmental impact as well. So that's a high level overview of the trust framework that I've been working on.
Love it. And in terms of the revisions that are coming, should we expect a new and different acronym, or are we sticking with trust?
No, I think trust I'm gonna stay with. I think it's an ongoing discussion, but currently the next phase of work that I'm working on is Ford and Omidyar has funded some research to look at M&A and to tie materiality of these kind of trusted practices to any kind of outcome with respect to acquisitions. And so I think I'll just end up honing more into what these mean and updating it a bit, but this will be the framework that I'll stick with.
Sounds great. All right. So, Tracy, I think you've given us a great starting point for thinking about this from an investor perspective. And I'm right that this is a diligence framework. So as you're evaluating a potential investment, looking at what a company is doing, its practices through this trust framework. So that that helps the investor. I want to shift gears a bit and look at it from a company perspective. And Beth, obviously you wear multiple hats, and so I'm going to come back in this conversation and talk about how we would advise companies to take these issues into account. But I'm curious for you personally, as our chief legal officer, how do you approach these issues? And maybe I can focus a bit on kind of this question of balance, right? You clearly are somebody who sees the potential and are excited by the potential for what you can do with AI, but you have a set of risks that you've got to manage. How do you get that balance right from an in-house chief legal officer perspective?
Great question, Josh. Thank you. I think I mean, for all the lawyers on the call, what's really helpful is it's quite similar to a lot of other risk assessments and governance models like data privacy. So you have to start with what are the actual risks. So like if for Novata, we're not a developer, we don't create our own AI models, which is actually quite helpful from a risk perspective, but knowing that we have use of it in our platform, but also across our employee base. That was very helpful to narrow in on like, well, what are the real risks here? The risks are data leakage of people putting in, information that we don't have the consent to put in, that we are putting personal information in there, that we're harming our own proprietary rights by throwing, special trade secret data or methodologies into ChatGPT or something similar. It was very helpful to get clear on like what are the almost non-negotiable risks we need to manage versus what are the more edge cases and how do we handle that. I think to get the balance right, you have to bring in more people to the table. So we brought in our product teams, we brought other people that were extremely pro innovation and use of AI. And we all got together and like legal wrote the policy and then we rewrote it after everyone provided their comments and then we rewrote it again. And we really aimed for educating our workforce. So we have a list of approved tools. We have a list of like, absolutely no, you can never touch those tools. We have explanations of what do we mean when we say that's personal data and you can't put it in there. And we've been really forward with, we almost like tied our own hands with a lot of our customers by putting in our terms and conditions, we will use AI, but we will only use AI tools if they don't train or retain on data, which means there's no risk of data leakage and they've undergone like a robust legal and security assessment. So even in doing that, we said, look, we're going to move forward and let people know we're going to use AI. So we are going to be pro innovation in its use, but we're only going to do so in a manner, even before we've picked out who these vendors might be, that meets your own requirements so we can risk manage for you and for Novata. So I think it actually takes a lot of thought and communication with different groups at the company. But the more you dive into it and the more you make it like as easy for a 10-year-old to understand, like these are the risks of AI and these are the benefits of it, I think the easier you will navigate. That helps.
So I want to circle back on the externalities, and we're going to go, Sam, to you in a moment because I think you're I think at the forefront of thinking about how AI can be harnessed to accomplish sustainable objectives. And I think there's power in that. But before we get there, there are fears and concerns about sustainability, about the sustainability impacts of AI. So, there's the energy piece, and the use of energy, and then the resulting emissions from that energy usage. There's real concern about that. And then there's the social side of this in terms of, concerns about jobs and job losses as a result of the disruption from AI. And I guess I'm curious, Tracy and Beth, do you feel from an investor perspective or from an in-house perspective, looking at it, that it's your responsibility to take into account those externalities as you think about the use of AI? Or is that something that is kind of best left to the regulators and policy?
I think you have to take it into account because the regulations and the policies are on a pretty clear trend. I actually think, Tracy, your trust acronym does a phenomenal job of touching all those, but a lot of the regulations are requiring California, Colorado, the EU AI Act, that you can explain your models, that you know what they're connected to, you can know some of the impacts, that you understand it and have governance to such a degree that you can put exactly for people disclaimers and transparency of this is an AI tool and these are the impacts and this is how it's trained. If you don't assess the externalities, I think like that's the real intersection with sustainability because it's not going to be sustainable. Like if you're pulling it from systems that are highly emitting or don't have good energy systems that they're built upon, you're putting yourself in jeopardy for long-term usage there and also like costs of use. I think the social aspects are some of the most important though, and I am viewing it from a legal lens, but if you are not tracking the harmful potential impacts of outputs from AI that is under your control, and let's say it's providing content that was not designed to provide to children, or it's engaging with people in a manner that causes them to engage in harmful behaviors, like those are liabilities will come home to roost. So you can avoid that by getting in front of it. But that's my view from an in-house perspective. Tracy, I'd love to hear what you think from an investor perspective.
Yeah, no, I think similarly, the more that you can get ahead of these things, the better. It's interesting. I have a monthly a monthly group that meets, and this topic continues to come up. I think the one around workforce impact in particular, and I think the question is, what can you do about it? What is possible? And I think we're still very much in that stage. I think asking the question, do they have a plan at least for how they may contribute to helping to upskill, for example, how the company may plan to be, to think more broadly outside of their, immediate stakeholders. Those kinds of questions are coming into play. Are there any answers for them yet? No, I haven't seen a lot of examples or ways in which companies can, or investors really feel equipped to be able to ask the questions and look for the answer and which answers they're looking for. They're not quite sure, but it's certainly top of mind. So that I think the environmental piece of it, where I've seen it start to play out more, is on the cost question. To your point, Beth, I think we're getting more and more data and more clarity around some of the drag for some of the amount of energy being used. And so I think that is where that particular conversation comes into play. I also think, there's definitely more awareness around the unintended consequences, especially as it relates to teens, mental health. I'm not sure that there's a nice and neat sort of matrix or framework yet to understand how it is specifically investors can manage those risks, but certainly I would say it's part of the conversation. They're trying to figure it out and hopefully get some more clarity over the next year or so.
Okay, super helpful. And it sounds like, in some respects, wrestling with the questions is kind of the state of the art right now,
Yeah.
even if we don't yet have the answers. So, spent a little bit of time dwelling on some of the negative aspects of AI. Want to turn to the positive aspects of AI because AI has the ability to potentially help uh, companies and investors accomplish sustainability related goals. And so, Sam, was hoping you could talk to us about that. Where the opportunities, as you see them, in terms of how AI can be brought to bear to help tackle sustainability related challenges.
Yeah, sure. And maybe just to add one of my own thoughts to the previous conversation, we talked a lot about the E and the S, and I think there's also a G part to this. There's really an ESG of AI, if that's not too many acronyms to use at the same time. But like the question of who owns these systems, how they're run and managed, and the governance for them is in some ways like the fun one of the fundamental considerations, because who actually owns this technology and how it's run and the safeguards in place there, I think it's another really big aspect to consider on the risk side. But yeah, I mean, to come to your main question, I think the notion you were talking about before of balance and kind of weighing up the pros and cons here is an important aspect, because there are real and tangible risks for sure. And I think, both Tracy and Beth have done a great job kind of outlining kind of framework and thoughts for thinking about those risks and how to think about them and how to manage them. But it is also, I believe, true that there are some real serious and large opportunities for the use of AI, both in general and specifically in sustainability and ESG use cases. So, I mean, in general, I think lots of people are starting to experiment how to integrate AI tools into their own workflows. And I can, just say as an analogy from a software engineering perspective, I think there's some really interesting studies on this with GitHub showing kind of using AI tooling to support with AI software feature development can increase kind of like the productivity by kind of 55.8%. So that there is, and personally, I use a lot of these tools like Cursor and Claude Code and all sorts of things to help with the engineering process of building systems. And it's undeniable that they are incredibly helpful and really, really help productivity. And I think analogy of that kind of engineering workflow is going to start to apply to lots of people's jobs. And I really think that there's a lot of potential there. But what I wanted to kind of add to this conversation, I guess, is more specifically the opportunities of AI in sustainability and ESG workflows, which is obviously a lot of what we do at Briink. Sustainability is kind of a knowledge worker economy. It's a bit like law or finance. It has its own jargon and definitions and workflows and kind of like intensive workflow processes that need to be complete. And when we kind of mapped out all the work that sustainability and ESG folks do, we realized there was very, very large opportunities for AI in those workflows specifically. I'll just talk about a couple of them briefly, but especially in relation to sustainable finance or more kind of investor and finance focused. I mean, the first is ESG questionnaires. One of our flagship tools at Briink is how to actually use AI to support with the pre-filling of ESG questionnaires. That could be, LPs to GPs or suppliers to buyers. Also, many of these ESG standard CDP, PRI, or regulatory compliance reporting under, CSRD or SFDR. These typically can, this is not the maybe the most sexy work, but typically can take a massive majority of an ESG analyst's time. And a lot of the information already exists in unstructured documents, whether it's reports or Excels. And AI and the current iteration of AI is actually incredibly well-fitted technology to help pre-fill and support the ESG and sustainability reporting process. And maybe to talk about a kind of second one, which is really when you start to take this at scale, we have a lot of clients now who are also using our technology for portfolio screening. So ESG due diligence at scale. How can you use similar AI systems to find all the sustainability information about, a large portfolio of companies, and actually like pre-fill all of that information so you can start to do analytics, not just on a small set of your portfolio, but really look at it holistically. And then the third one I wanted to mention briefly is also using AI systems for the kind of downstream data analytics. So you can use AI to find this information, you can use AI to structure it. You can also use it to do things like ESG scoring and benchmarking on your portfolio, which is, otherwise an incredibly labor intensive process to do things like which companies you really need to focus on to help the most in their sustainability journey, or where they have the biggest ESG risks. So, I do definitely see that there are serious and material risks for AI, both as a sustainability risk and in sustainability, and we need to take that seriously. And that's why I think this conversation today is super important. But I do think, and maybe we'll have time to talk about it, in more detail as part of this conversation. But I do think with a thoughtful implementation of it, it also has a important role to play in accelerating, the work that is done in sustainability and sustainable finance itself. And if we kind of navigate those use cases carefully, we can really get the value out of a technology like this, right? While kind of avoiding the worst of the risks and challenges side.
Thanks for that, Sam. Super helpful. And I think, certainly I can say from the Novata side, we're very bullish on the incorporation of AI tools and Briink tools in particular into the workflows of our customers. So hear you. And, I think like a lot of tools, they can have, depending on how you wield them, they can have positive consequences, negative consequences. So thanks for helping us see the positive side of it. And want to come back to Beth for and ask you to put on a different hat now. So, you gave us the perspective as Chief Legal Officer. You're also, overseeing our metrics and regulations team that is really guiding our customers through the process of collecting the right set of data, collecting it in the right way, figuring out how to make use of it. And so I'm curious, in terms of, AI and as it's being increasingly considered by investors and through the lens of ESG, like what are we actually talking about? What metrics are people incorporating into questionnaires? What are the developments that are shaping how, on a kind of practical basis, investors are asking companies, either from a diligence perspective or from a monitoring perspective, what they're up to when it comes to AI?
I think one more than any other, I guess, area under our metrics that we offer on our platform, AI is where we get the most questions of what should I do? So I think there's a lot of like, I'm not sure what I should be collecting. A massive thank you to Tracy and her leadership with the responsible AI venture framework, because that's been a building block that we were able to offer. And we regularly see people going into that, selecting metrics from that. The most common ones right now around AI are almost all G. So like while everyone talks about the environmental impact and what a big deal it is for sustainability, we're not seeing a lot of people collecting, like emissions impacts by or emissions intensity by use of AI systems. The most common questions are almost ones you'd kind of expect of, do you have an AI policy of any sort? Do you do training on AI codes of conduct? Percentage of workforce trained. Another really, really common one is there an individual at a senior level, or more common is board level accountability for AI? I think those are really, like right now, those are the ones that we see most commonly. I think that that's going to evolve and there will be more. I think what's more surprising is there's a very large number of investors that aren't even asking that yet. And I think going back to our conversation before of everyone probably is and should be using AI. There's so much benefit from it. But if you're not even finding out, do you have a policy? Are people being trained? I think you open yourself up to a lot of risk that could be more effectively managed. So I think right now, nearly all the questions we are seeing are G. They're all related to governance. Again, Tracy's acronym covers it. There's a lot of questions about explainability and accountability. But when it comes to all the other, how is this impacting the people you hire? Is there discrimination in this? We're not even seeing a lot of those at this point.
Yep. And so is it fair to say that the questions that are being asked right now are really coming from the lens of managing business risk? So how the use of AI could impact your investment returns and how the misuse of it could affect your investment returns. It's mostly non kind of regulatory. It's business risk. Is that the lens right
Yeah,
now?
I think they're much more like, is this not a company killer, but like if you don't have this, like no matter what your business is, we're probably exposed to risk because you haven't done anything on AI, you haven't trained your workforce.
Yep.
I think the next layer, and what we will probably see, because a lot of these regulations come into force in January 2026, or they have like phased implementation starting this year. I think you'll see more customized, also bifurcated questions, because the questions that you might ask a SaaS company that uses Gen AI tools is very different than you'd ask like a pure AI company that's developing their own models. And a lot of those questions are going to get more nuanced. But I think what we're seeing right now is people saying, I want to know, do you have your arms around these risks? Are you doing anything to actually manage them? And I think the next clear phase of evolution, especially for everyone needing to meet the regulations, is going to be, now tell me a lot more. What are the impacts of this? Who's training it? How do you ensure that there's no bias? Like, I think that's the next phase, but we're not seeing that commonly right now.
And so let's talk about the regulatory piece. What's coming? Tracy, can you give us a sense of where this is headed and what folks are going to have to be dealing with, even if it's not something that they would otherwise choose to?
Yeah, I'm not sure you want to ask the American this question, but I'll give it I'll give it a shot.
California. I don't.
I agree with what Beth has said. I mean, certainly, just high level view, Europe, has been leading in this effort with respect to regulation with the EU AI Act, and yes, as it continues to sort of move through its phases. We will see, I think, others follow suit and using that as a guidepost and start to ask more, a lot more specific questions. I think there's also a lot more around data and data protection that is both being driven by the regulation, but also from the legal side of things as well, which is, I think, moving even faster than the regulation in some cases. I think, in the US, as you know, we pulled back on a number of things. It's at the state level for many, and many states are, taking the charge, California being one of them, where I sit, trying to, I think tackle different pieces of it. I think the efforts to create large, all-encompassing kind of bills is probably not the next step that we'll see. I think we'll see things that are just a bit more targeted. So like with California and the whistleblower protections, you'll start to see stuff around child safety. I mean, those kinds of areas and more targeted areas we'll see. National security also is something that's talked about quite a bit. So then, looking at how your system complies with, responsible AI under the Pentagon is definitely a framework I've heard before, and certainly the NIST framework on the U.S. side. So I think, it's still moving and evolving, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of clear guidance from the regulatory side of things. But I think in that case, the legal side of things has certainly caused companies, investors to sort of take note of, what kinds of legal suits. So that, again, goes back to all of the data protection stuff, whether it's, text or voice and image, and things, like chatbots, and what kind of misinformation is our chatbots giving on behalf of your company. You could be liable for that. And we see a little bit on the hiring side. We've seen some cases where hiring tools have shown bias. So I think as more and more of those start to come up, we'll also start to see, that impact regulation. But I think the lawsuits will come first.
Interesting. Okay. Let's turn to practical advice. We've got some questions that are coming in, and would welcome more questions if you have them. We got a great one that came in about for smaller, earlier stage companies, What advice would you have for establishing a strong approach to responsible AI? And the person who asked the question asked for tangible examples. And Beth, maybe I can put you on the spot because we're 4 years in, but I think if you go back in time to when we first started wrestling with this, we were an early stage company. So, what practical advice would you give to an early stage company in terms of getting this right out of the gate?
I also love that they asked for tangible examples. So it's kudos to the question asker. I think, and I know it's going to sound like very legally of me, but you start with a policy. Please don't download like a template and then just publish it for everyone to read and I guess assign their attestation to. Like read through it and make sure it's easy to understand. Understand the actual risks. Like maybe there's very minimal AI risks at your company. Very likely your employees are using a lot of Gen AI tools. So there's probably some degree of risk. And if that's what it is, like get your hands around that. What do you need to do to protect the company and the assets you hold regarding those risks? Put that in a policy, make it easy to understand. And then I think training. Like nobody wants to put a company that they work for in harm's way, and nobody wants to contribute to something quite negative. So if you can explain it in a manner that everyone understands and make some very basic requirements of, this has to go through legal for review. If you don't have a legal team, then, you can identify somebody else that's like the main accountability person for AI. Even better if you can have a committee so you have different voices. Make sure they understand there has to be a human in the loop so you can avoid a lot of the infringement risks. I think really starting with at least a policy and training is the best thing you can do. And then I would say reach out to somebody in a similar company. So maybe similar growth stage or similar industry and ask what they're doing. I think you can find by speaking to peers a lot of really interesting developments that they've done to either protect the company or get in front of AI risks without harming innovation.
Could maybe add one thought to that too, which is just what we see. We work with a lot of folks who are starting to implement and integrate AI into their systems in all sorts of ways. And I think also just practically getting started, not necessarily with, putting things in production into critical systems, but just understanding what type of use cases might, where would people want to use AI in your company? Where would be some of the higher value places? And to start to play around with it to start to really understand tangibly, where it's working, where it's not, what those risks are, like what they look like in your case. I think that everyone is starting to explore this technology and it has a lot of big potential. And so just starting to learn and navigate practically with some toy use cases, even before you decide like how to use them in production, we find this helps people like kind of, think through what it would really mean.
I think it's a good point, Sam. I would also just say, like, underscore what you're saying of play with it. Like, if you're not using it, you're not going to do a really good job of helping everyone manage the risks because you might not know all the benefits they're expecting to receive from it, how to navigate it. So the more that you can lean into it, I think the much better job you'll do at managing it.
Sam, we've got a question about data quality, and I would assume this is something that people are asking all the time when they're thinking about incorporating AI into their workflows. How do you think about, the problem of hallucinations? How do you think about managing the quality of the output to make sure that, if you're putting something into a report or a filing, that you can have confidence if AI helped generate that output, that it's going to be solid? How do you think about the quality challenge?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great question and definitely something we think about all the time because I think for, real world use cases, especially in sustainability, like quality really matters, right? It really is important that the results are valid and real and factual and useful. I mean, I think that this sort of actually one of the other topics that I was, hoping to bring up in terms of the risks of AI is more from a kind of practical implementation perspective. I think there are risks for implementing AI without really in an unthoughtful way. If you just, if you're slapping a bunch of stuff into ChatGPT and taking the outputs without really thinking about them, and you sending that to clients or whatever, there is a lot of risks involved in that. But a thoughtful implementation to how you're using AI, and particularly from a data quality perspective, can really get you a lot of value. So in terms of kind of practical side stuff, and actually it relates quite a bit to some of, so I think the transparency and understandability side of Tracy's framework from the top of the conversation. For example, with all Briink technology, all AI answers come with auditable source references back to the original source of information that was used. And we, that was like as a core principle of how our entire system works, because we think it's super important that you can always trace back where the information is coming from. And that also means that having, kind of human in the loop processes in place to verify. I think if you have a thoughtful implementation of AI systems, they can significantly, reduce time to do a process, to cut costs, to, open up new workflows, but they need to be done thoughtfully in a way where there's critical steps, there is still the human to check them, and you can have tools to to help you do that faster, but those kind of systems need to be in place. And maybe that kind of relates to a final point of this. A lot of the tooling that we build also comes with kind of things like inconsistency checks and quality and confidence scores for answers, so you can have a sense of how to prioritize that kind of human in the loop and verification process. And I think that those kind of safeguards are really important to make sure you get value and kind of reduce the practical risks of data quality issues.
Thanks, Sam. And Tracy, want to come back to you. We've got a question that's about transparency and how you actually evaluate this. And I want to generalize the question a bit, but it's the reference, the person asking the question references, black box models. Maybe if you could help us kind of think about, is this a continuum where it's like, is it a binary thing, like it's black box or it's transparent, or is it more of a continuum? And how do you evaluate this? And is, is there one approach that is kind of fundamentally the right way to do this, or are we still kind of in that messy moment of figuring out what good looks like?
I think there has been some sort of movement around, I wouldn't say standardization, but certainly, I mean, I hear more and more, and I see more examples of model cards, for example. I see more, especially for, I would say this particular on if you want to look at some examples, I would say look to companies that are really sort of touting the responsible AI and demonstrating how they're doing that with their own software. So Salesforce, Microsoft, these groups definitely have some examples about what they mean by transparency and what their systems are, what they contain, what kind of rights they own, what are the licenses look like. So that's a good starting point. In terms of, but I don't think that we're, by any stretch there yet around standardization or necessarily asking, or at least I haven't seen, and maybe Beth or Sam, you have, but where there's here's what it looks like. It's either black box or it's fully transparent, and this is a checklist of transparency items that you need to demonstrate. So I would say that we're still kind of in that gray area of trying to figure it out, but certainly, there are ways to look at, whether or not a company is being fully transparent. On the investor side, I'm asking for those things if I'm diligencing a company. But from, outside of the company perspective, I think it often can be more challenging. If I was investing in a company and they just said it's too hard to explain and it's a black box, well, then I'm not sure that I would be proceeding with further diligence on that. So hopefully that helps to answer some of it, but I'd love to hear if others, Beth or Sam, have had any other examples.
I mean, this is a very incomplete answer, but practically speaking, I tend to think of transparency kind of at different levels, because I think there is, from you just don't care, you have no idea what's going on, you've never even thought about it, even starting to do things like delineate when an answer or something is coming from AI versus a person already starts to add some level of what's going on, like where things are coming from. And one level down from that is kind of what I was describing before, but things like source references that we use, the prompts that we use, the input outputs. It's not really transparency of the core model, but it starts to give you an auditable trace of what's happening, and you can infer a lot of the of things from that. And then there is like the final level down, which I think is just has a lot of complexity from it, both technically and kind of legally, but is the actual transparency of the logic that is happening at the model level, like how a set of inputs turn to a set of outputs, which is a very complicated topic. And I think there's many, there's a lot of work that's needed to be done there to really unblack box the black box. But I think if you're thinking from a practical standpoint of like traceability to understand the, why models did what they did, it's possible to kind of go down those layers.
So unfortunately, we are running out of time. I want to ask one final question of folks about how you stay current and up to date on this fast-moving space. But before we get to that, a couple of final housekeeping notes. One is to learn more about the work that Tracy and Sam are doing. Check out the chat. We've got some links where you can learn more. Two, we're going to flash up a poll question to see if you'd be interested in speaking with the Novata team about the work that we do and potentially getting our help if you're on the investment side and thinking about how you can incorporate the questions about AI into your sustainability questionnaires. Our team is ready to have that conversation with you. So if you're interested, just put a note into the poll and we'll reach out. And now let's get to the final question. Would love to hear how you stay current, given that this space is moving so quickly. And Sam, maybe we'll start with you and then go around the horn.
Yeah, sure. I mean, no magic solutions, unfortunately, but I speak to a lot of people who are working in similar spaces. I think everyone is trying to figure this out, basically. There's no one who has all the answers, and just chatting with other people about it is a good way to stay up to date. And then there's a number of kind of newsletters and blogs specifically on the risks and opportunity of AI applied to sustainability and ESG, but also in general. Would be happy to share some links to that after if that's helpful. And also events and webinars like this one.
Thanks, Sam. Beth?
I just have to say thank you to Novata for always keeping me current. I think using it all the time in my own life helps me stay current a lot, but mostly our employees. Like we have a very clear system. People can ask over Slack for a tool to be approved. And as a result, I'm constantly being exposed to novel use cases, ways that it can be done, and we have to look into it. So I think for me, that's been one of the best ways to learn is from our own colleagues. And I have to give a shout out to actually one of our advisory board members, Bob Eccles. He is like a very well-known figure in sustainability, but has become wildly interested and educated on AI and has like a whole Substack on it. And I'd highly recommend that because I learn a new AI thing from Bob probably every week.
And Beth, we should also put in a plug for you. Follow Beth on LinkedIn. Beth does a regular update on the regulatory side, which is really, really helpful in terms of staying current in terms of what regulations are coming down the pike. Tracy, last word.
Yeah, so a lot of what they've all mentioned, I think also I love technology. So I've built my first agent. So I get in there and and play around quite a bit. So that's one way. Also, I happen to be in a academic setting where I have lots of other colleagues who are tackling AI, and we meet on a regular basis, and I learn all kinds of new things. And then I also have advisory council and other sort of salons and events that I produce, and I get the opportunity to hear from a lot of people. So yeah, those are all the ways.
Great. Well, Tracy, Beth, Sam, thank you all so much for making time today and sharing a little bit of your experience. And to everybody who joined today to learn, thank you for making the time. Always great to have you and look forward to another conversation soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josh.
Thanks.